My name is Sabrine Adiba, and I'm with DCFS, Give Us Back Our Children. And I'm so grateful to be a supporter and a part of that group because there's so much to learn. There's so much growth in knowing that you can stand up and that you have rights. It wasn't my children that were taken from me, but my grandchild, who was a newborn baby. And I was with her from the time of her birth. I cut her cord, and I'm the first one she called mama. She was so traumatized when they took her from me because I wouldn't conform to what they wanted me to conform with. When I saw something that was unjust, and I questioned them, and they told me, you should have kept your mouth shut. You have no rights. Even though I was a maternal grandmother, these people harassed me day and night. No matter where I went, they were here, and they didn't just knock on my door. They came in there. And when I tried to question them about anything that they were doing, I remember one DCFS worker saying, did I say anything to you? I said, no, then shut up. And this is the way they talked to me and treated me for years when I fought for that grandbaby. And she was so traumatized when they took her away from me that she was pulling her hair out of her head at 14 months old. She couldn't speak. She was banging her head against the wall. And she's never been the same since. They still won't even let me see her. And she's 14 years old. And that's just part of it. So I won't take up all the time, but I still have nightmares. She still has nightmares. This is a war they started. We can't sit down. Okay. Kidnapping by deception for maternal gain, dividing poor families for colonial gain, stealing our babies, deleting cultural names. Greed don't justify oppressive pain. Unified regimes is what strong families need. Stop closing your eyes while our dynasty bleeds. Stop sitting on your hands waiting on politicians to fill our demands. Child protection services sitting behind desks, spitting slippery lies, feeding Jane Crow, breaking tribal ties. Rose too salty that you unaware, kidnapping by deception is a tremendous snare. Please
with your contribution, can you say who you are, where you're from, and then tell us what you have to. Oh, okay. Carolyn would just like to add something that she forgot to raise earlier, if that's okay.
Oh, I wanted to, this part I missed out on saying, how they take the children from one house to another. When a child is doing good in one home, they sees that they're doing good, so they remove them to put them in another home to make this child angry. This child is not on medication or nothing. About time they move her to another home, they're medicating the child. And it's just going on more and more routine. It was a friend of mine's whose granddaughters was taken, and she had them for 3 years. And when they took them from her, they were still going to the school where they was at when they was living with her. The 6-year-old took a pencil and stuck it in her ear, and it came out her mouth. That's how angry she was. Okay, she went down, she reported to the supervisor, and they did nothing. She still don't have her grandkids today. She's still fighting for them. They come to school, they don't have no underwears on. They drop them off early before school start. I said, what type of place, DHS system you working with? Because girl, I'd have been down Fox News with all 3 of them, you know, and it's just terrible how they traumatizing these kids. And the medication that they put them on, by the time they get 15, they telling them they ain't need it, but then by the time they did, they can't recuperate without it. And it's horrible that some of these kids out here is from medication, they can't think right because might need this medication or the therapy. And it's horrible because they just switches houses with them.
Thanks, Carolyn. Before we open the mic here, apparently Maru has only got another 20 minutes. So if there are any specific questions for Maru, then please could we have them now? Maru was speaking on the whole question of immigration and the separation of children at the borders and the vulnerability of the children and how they're fighting back against that and what we need to do internationally to put an end. Yes, sister at the back there. Wait for the mic. Thank you.
Hello, I was wondering, what effect, or is there an effect from enlisting home countries to help the families here to resist?
So the question was, what are home countries doing for those of us here in the US to resist? Just want to clarify that. Was that the question?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Thank you. Obviously, governments are part of the problem. Right now, for example, Mexico is detaining people that are crossing throughout the continent to reach the US. And when you hear that the numbers of people didn't grow as much after Title 42 ended last month, it was because the Mexican government is detaining migrants. Recently this year, there was a fire in a detention center in Mexico, right in Ciudad Juarez, which is right across from El Paso, Texas. People died. And Mexico has been for many years an accomplice to the US international politics against migrants. And that, Guatemala is opening a quote unquote center for people to request asylum before getting here. So all of our governments throughout the continent that have been invaded by the US, that they have imposed dictators, or they have imposed economic policies that make our countries very difficult for them to be independent, work also to stop the force of migrants and rights of migrants to go through the continent. Yet, for example, in Mexico, there's a group called Otros Dreams en Acción, Other Dreams in Action. And there are self-organized group of deportees and people that have had to return to Mexico after living here in the US for many decades. And they are working with us as people are returned or deported to Mexico, not only to do the basics that the government is not doing, which is even teach you how to dial a number in Mexico, how to get an ID, how to travel in public transportation, because a lot of people deported have not been in their countries for decades, or sometimes as they were children, so they don't remember. So they not only do that kind of mutual aid, they're also working in changing policy in Mexico to make it easy for people to get an ID, which is almost impossible in Mexico. And they're also working with us to create international push to allow for migrants to travel throughout the continent. But the most important thing is we want the right to cross borders as goods and products do for free. They're not asked for visas, but we're also working for the right to stay, to not having to migrate in the first place. So it's a very small group of people throughout the continent that are fighting for us to have the right to travel and the right to stay and come back if necessary, but it's very minimal because right now, for example, the Mexican government made it very difficult for nonprofits to continue their work. So a lot of NGOs end up losing their license. And so this number of groups all suddenly reduced. And in Mexico also is prohibited for foreigners to actually engage in political activities. So there's no like Haitian groups of people self-organized that can actually move policy. There's no Venezuelan groups in Mexico. It's very different as from here where we have the right and we have to fight for that right. In Mexico, it's not possible. And I'm not very familiar in the rest of the continent, but we have not seen a lot of support due to many of these policies. And we know that it's intentional. So precisely us as migrants throughout the continent cannot self-organize. And this is mainly the push of the United States to stop us from organizing. Yet you see the caravans of migrants, right? Self-organizing to protect themselves against the organized crime in the oppression from many different groups as migrants need to flee from their continents throughout other continents. So I hope that answers the question, and thank you for the question.
Yeah, Maru, you're still there. Is Maru still on? Yeah, Maru, this is Margaret Prescott. Thank you for joining us. Maru, I wanted to ask a question and then pose a possibility. We know and heard about all those children that were taken at the border, of course, during the Trump administration. We know that not all of those children have actually been reunited with their families. A lot of people don't know that under the Biden administration, that children have also been taken. And there's very little information about what is happening with those children. But I'm just wondering, on the panel, you heard the group Give Us Back Our Children nationally here in the US, and internationally, we're part of Support Not Separation. I think that we need to strengthen our demands in our networks, at least in Give Us Back Our Children here in the US, about what is happening with migrant children, with immigrant children. And you may not have the answer right now, but I think it would be good to be in touch to see if we could have representation within Give Us Back Our Children to make sure that the demands we're putting forward and we're fighting for reflects what's happening with migrant children, just as we are with this huge case, the Supreme Court in relation to Indigenous children. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Margaret, and good to see you, even if it's on the screen. It is very difficult to organize in regards to children being detained, separated, because there's a big confidentiality issue. So when we have a name and a number is called an alien number. That's what ICE gives us immigrants when they put us in deportation proceedings. That number is what allows us to find people in the system. But even if we had a name and a number from a minor, we wouldn't be able to find them in a system because the system that we are able to use to locate adults here, for example, in Tacoma, is actually a company that charges $7 for every transaction of money you want to send money to a person's detained books. So if we want to send $20, they charge us $7. So we only send 13. But actually their system, we use it to locate people. We don't use the Immigration Customs Enforcement's locator, which is online, because it doesn't really work. Yet you have this private system that gives us access to people's information, but not for minors. Unless families come to us and talk to us, then we're able to start mobilizing. But a lot of families, precisely because they just arrived, precisely because they've gone through so many things, the last thing they want is to organize. All they want is, let me in, give me my children, and I'll be quiet. I'll do anything you want so I can get my children, and I won't do, I won't make any waves. So what you see in regards to organizing is very limited. You see a lot of legal organizations filing lawsuits, which are really important, but that's not organizing. And that's why we don't have strong demands, because as long as families feel the chill effect of these policies against them, we can really move those demands. We believe that those that are in the system and are being oppressed are the ones that need to lead, and they have to put those demands at the forefront. That's how we work with people detained. They tell us their demands and we push them on that side. But if that's not the case with families, it's really, really difficult. So we have those two factors. One, the confidentiality issues, which is very difficult to locate people in the system. And second, the fear that families go through that don't allow them to organize. Remember, this is how the systems work. Make it really difficult for us. Be so afraid that we don't want to organize. We don't want to speak up. All we want is to survive. And I think those two things, as long as we are not able to surpass them, it will be hard to organize. That doesn't mean we shouldn't. I think we should, and we some of us have, but it's going to take us a bit longer to get there.
Thank you, Maru. Thanks for that. We've got a few more speakers, questions and contributions. So I know, Pat, you want to speak. Yeah, these are questions for Maru because Maru only has limited time. So,
is it on? Huh? Mic is on. Okay, we had a situation that came to highlight in Malaysia recently where children were being deported with their mothers and fathers in the immigration detention centers. So the issue was highlighted kind of things, and the government's response was, we'll take the children out and house the children separately. Whereas our response was that, in a sense that we said, no, don't separate the children from their parents. In fact, actually create a special class and actually house the families and the children. I would also like to get a response to that. How do you all feel?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? So once we're able to find out what's happening, how it's happening, for example, here in the Seattle area, we learned that children were being placed in hotels because there was such a bad rap against nonprofits housing children. Right here in the Seattle area, there's at least 3 to 4 nonprofits that house children, Lutheran Community Services, Jewish Family Services, Catholic Charity Services. All these, religious groups are the ones getting the contracts to house children. But there's been so many scandals about it that we found out through some other people that children were being placed in hotels. So people start organizing against it, and all of a sudden those hotels were empty. But where are the children now? We don't know. Also, we have been able to get information through flight crews, attendants at flights that reach out to us and say, this flight has 10 children. They're being flown from, El Paso to Miami. We wanted to let you know. So we start alerting people in Miami and say, you know, 10, 20 children are arriving in this flight at this time. So it's like we become like private investigators, honestly, to find out what's going on. And then try to mobilize the groups that we know in different areas to respond to that. So as long as we have that basic information that otherwise we wouldn't have, and alert the public about it, the people respond immediately, and that public pressure is what really helps get those children back with their families. But sometimes they're just move around, and that's the part where we still have not been able to overcome.
Wanted to say, I'm sorry, I had to pop out just a moment, so I hope I'm not repeating anything, but I just wanted to say, Maru, we were really thrilled when we saw you campaigning against the NGOs. You know, we don't often hear that. It's something that we have very much done in the UK. My name's Nikki. I'm from Global Women Against Deportations. I'm from Legal Action for Women, and together we're in a coalition with Crystal, as Crystal mentioned earlier. And we focus on fighting detention, destitution, and deportations. I know we've been in touch before, but when you were campaigning against the NGOs, literally outside their windows, shouting at them, and have exposed the profiteering of the NGOs, it's such an important job, because they are standing between us and the money that we need to survive and to fight deportations. And so I really wanted to just acknowledge that and say that it was really helpful, because when we have been campaigning against the charity sector and the NGOs, of course, we're always accused of, splitting the movement or undermining the good guys. And these people are not the movement. They are masquerading as the movement. They are taking money to maintain the system of deportation and detention and destitution, because their jobs and their careers depend on it. So I just wanted to say thank you. And yes, we definitely want to meet and get really down to some nitty-gritty with you so that we can work more closely together in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, I forgot that we did that too. There's a detention center for children in Five, which is really close to the detention center for adults in Tacoma. And yeah, we are told the same here, but we remind people that yes, they're not the movement, and there's no reason anyone should get any money to detain any human being. It doesn't matter, the age or the nationality. Children should be with their families, and families should be at home, period.
Mr. Maru, I just wanted to stress, I'm also from London, Support Not Separation. And I just wanted to stress that we really need to have a meeting, an international meeting with you, Maru, on this whole issue of the children being taken, the immigrant children, because frankly, it's happening. I mean, they're treating mothers as surrogates increasingly, where somehow you're just producing children for the state to then decide what is to happen to those children and which families they think those children should go to and which organizations are going to be making money out of the whole thing. It's really shocking. And GWAD has done a lot with trying to stop children being detained. And I think you may want to say something about that in England, where the children are disappearing. There's a lot of sexual abuse going on with children in care, whether it's immigrant children or whether it's native children, who are going to care. And then there's just massive scandals that come out some years later, where thousands of children were sexually abused, and there were whole rings of men and social workers in cahoots, and the police, everybody involved. And every time there's then an inquest, which says this has been going on, but nothing really happens. Then you get another inquest about another childcare facilities and another and another and another. And the people who are responsible, I'm not talking only about the people who are found responsible of the rape of children, but the police officers, the social workers, who facilitated that, or maybe took money, you just never know. Nothing ever happens to them. You know, and it's so similar to the children being taken at the border and then disappearing, like you raised. I really feel we need to have a more in-depth meeting about what we want to do and how that is to feed into the whole support, not separation, because it's one issue. You know, whoever the children are, it's one issue. And the fact is that the mother and child bond now counts for nothing. And increasingly, they want to detach children from their mothers. You know, often a condition for kinship is that the relative who takes the children has to guarantee that the mother will not see the children. I mean, can you imagine anything more cruel? To tell the granny you can't have the child unless you guarantee that your daughter is not going to see the children? I mean, that's just what's going on. It's just an absolute scandal. And the money is huge. We really should see the Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway film, because it's all about money. Again, in Norway, it's all about money and all these layers of people who are making 22% profit in the UK, okay? That is massive in terms of any industry of any kind. To make 22% profit is massive.
Yeah, and that's true in a lot of different places. There is a lot of organizing going on to try and find the children that have disappeared, for example, in hotels around the country. In the UK, they just wholesale put children from who are coming over on boat journeys between Britain and France, and are at extreme danger in terms of the ocean, in the sea there, you know, what's happening. So there is a lot to put together. And this seems very timely to be doing it now, because we have got, you know, growing movements in our countries that are ready to do something and want to do something, because they don't stand for that kind of trauma and barbarity in the way you treat children. You know, mothers need their children and children need their mothers, as the All African Women's Group always say. So this is a moment in time where we have to connect that.
I'm with the Welfare Warriors, and we've been fighting for the lives of mothers and children who've been terrorized by Child Protective Services. And money is the big issue here. What happened in 1985 was the Clinton administration, when were the Clintons there? 1998. The Clintons have made it almost impossible to return children now. It's 1,000 times harder than we were organizing for 10 years before that. We could get children home within maybe 10 months, 6 months. Now it's hopeless. They have privatized it. They've created millions and millions of jobs for Americans. They've in terms of privatization. So for instance, in Wisconsin, the state took over, and once the state took over, they privatized it. They're giving $22 million a year to Children's Hospital to take the children, just to take the children, a hospital, and they're an adoption agency. Then they're giving another agency $22 million to take the children. And so they created an adoption agency. Now, the wealthy Americans used to always go overseas to adopt. Now that figure's gone down to less than 1,000. While they're adopting, they just go to the inner city and they automatically get a child. They're promised a child within 3 months. Now, the other thing the Clinton administration did, they just poured money into these adopters. Now they become foster adopters, and they're getting money as foster adopters, and then they're adopting the kids, because the Clintons said you only had 24 months. They start at 12 months to take the kids away. By 18 months, if you haven't gotten your kids back, watch out, because they're then giving them to the adopter, the foster adopters. And once the foster adopters, these are doctors, lawyers, CEOs, once they get your child, they get a guaranteed income. In the United States, we have no guaranteed income, except now we have guaranteed income for the Child Protective Service system. The adopters, wealthy adopters, get a check for 18 years for our children, you know, our little brown, black, and white poor children. And that's who they go after, only poor children. So we have no lawyers, because of course the lawyers would represent middle and upper class, but they don't take from those classes. So the constant finding more ways to get money. We had like about 20 agencies in town handling all the mandatory classes for moms. Now we have 200 agencies in town. Then the worst thing that they created, the worst job, they created mandatory visitation. This is for every single family, not just like for a bad mom who hit her kid. Every single family for any and no reason. And that means that $60 per head per child goes to every single, and you don't have to have any education or anything, for every single family. You have to have supervised visits. And since the supervised visit agencies are getting this $60 per child per head, if you have 3 kids, think of what that is. They're getting so much money, they never give up the mandatory visits. They just keep saying, no, the mother's not ready, the mother's, which is one of the reasons those time limits that the Clintons put on are so deadly. So here's just one little example. A mom had 9 children. She went to the social services to ask for help finding housing, of course. And they said, we can't help you find housing, but what we could do is we can take your children from you, 9 children, put them in 10 different homes, and you can look for housing on your own. And so they took 9 children for a year and a half from them, their siblings, their mothers, their brothers, their sisters, their language, their food, their homes. They took the children, put them all over the place, never helped the mother get any type of housing, and this is considered abuse and neglect now. You see, so they won. Children's Hospital got $250,000 on that one family, and now remember, we've got millions of families being terrorized like this. So the welfare warriors have always been, you know, we believe that you have to, in order to organize, you have to go to the streets, the courts, and the legislature. We never do the legislature. No mothers want to go there. But we do the streets, and we do the courts, especially to get the children home in terms of the courts. Now, one of the things we've been working on for 6 years is to start lawsuits happening. Oh, and by the way, first of all, go back a second. Maybe a lot of you have heard that a lot of us across the country want to abolish child protective services. And it's a movement to abolish the family police, child protective services. And, you know, it used to be that we were fighting for open courts. We still have no open courts. But this is far more serious. Since the Clintons did all this, it's just the most deadly, difficult thing to fight. Imagine having supervised visits forever and not being able to ever, and the children are never allowed to speak to their mother during supervised visits about when they're coming home or anything else. All right. So I'm the last thing, one little last example. We're trying to find a way, and we want to brainstorm afterwards with anyone who has ideas about how we have the money for the lawsuit now, and we finally, after 6 years, have a lawyer for the lawsuit. What we don't have is a plaintiff, and that's a problem. And we're suing on behalf of the battered women, because that's the newest target in the United States. Women who've been hit by a man lose, the children lose their mother. They lose their mother, they lose their everything. And so it's a terrible injustice, and it's something new. It was started only about 15 years ago. So one of the places getting money, for instance, is Wendy's. Wendy's is a fast food restaurant, and they get $600,000 of our state money to find more adopters to fill the system with more children taken away. So that's AFSCME is the bill that the Clintons passed. We're all trying to remove AFSCME. AFSCME is the deadly bill. It has to be removed and taken over, because it's really, really harming in every city across the United States. It's harming so many tens of thousands of children and mothers and fathers and grandmothers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pat. So because we're coordinating, trying to figure out, this is a working group, we're trying to figure out how to work together, support each other.
Okay, yeah, I think it's important that we get down to the cases of the actions that we are doing, because then we can, you know, if we all know what others are doing around the world, these are things that we can join into and take part in. Okay. Okay, so Tracy online.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you all. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I have disabled family members at home, so I've got caring responsibilities and couldn't fly to Philly, but it's been a great day and it was great yesterday. I enjoyed watching yesterday. I am part of Support Not Separation, and I am here in London, and I'm the coordinator of the Disabled Mothers' Rights Campaign, which is organised by Winvisible, and that's for women with visible and invisible disabilities. So I am the coordinator of the Disabled Mothers' Rights Campaign, and that is organised by Winvisible, part of Separation. For I lost my child to care, as my sister Anne said, because my child had a disability, a severe genetic disability, and I had an invisible disability. I hadn't hurt my child, and he was taken from me because I fought very hard to get funding to keep him supported in the community, all the nurses, all his medical care, all his schooling in the community, and it was very expensive. And that's why I lost my child to care. Children who are disabled and mothers who are disabled are extreme targets in the system, both in the US, I think, obviously I don't know it as well, and here in the UK, because disability is seen as harmful. It's actually seen as neglect, and we are therefore targets. And many of the children that are taken also have a very similar disability to their mothers. And these children are taken, they don't go to loving foster carers or as the pretty films show. They are taken away and rented homes. They are not allowed to go to family members, such as our sister from Scotland, who is a kinship carer, because if the mother's family do not agree that the mother herself is abusive and can't look after her child, the child is not allowed to go to family members. And I think that's probably the same in the States. And that's why meetings like this are important, because what happens in one country also happens in another country. My son spent 2 years in an unregulated home where he didn't have a bath or shower for 2 years because there was not an accessible bathroom for him. He did not have a hot meal for 2 years because he couldn't look after himself in his wheelchair and no one would push him around. And by the time he got home, my funny, bright, happy, charming child no longer smiles. His hair was matted and he was covered in fleas. That's what care looks like in our country. I just want to say there's a lot of inquiries going on about children in care, and in particular, disabled children in care. Disabled children in care are 4 times more likely to be raped and abused. And just recently, children being taken from their loving mothers, put in institutions, disabled children, particularly children of colour, had their heads shaved. Just recently, we worked with Channel 5 TV, and we put out a sort of a little mini programme. And it has been quite important for the Disabled Mothers' Rights Campaign, because that has given us a lot of publicity. And a lot of people have been contacting us. We've had a lot of press interested and a lot of disabled mothers interested, because we need to work together with the disabled mothers, with the movement as a whole, because only by being together will we be able to put forward what we need and what we want. We need to hear their voices. We're right now making a charter of rights for the Disabled Mothers Campaign, and we're hoping to get that exposed because we're having an opening on the 19th of July. But the main thing that we all need to work towards is that children need to stay with their mothers, and mothers need money to look after their children. in particular those with disabilities, in particular those who live in poverty. And so we really do have to press the care income so that mothers have money in hand so that they can make the choices. And we're lucky that we have an international network, and we do need to work together internationally, because poverty is one of the biggest things in all of our countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Next is Dee Dee.
Just briefly, there's a book that I have not read, but the title kind of says it all, called The Revolution Will Not Be Funded. And the premise of the book is that wealthy people's money that comes out of an extractive economy, if the wealthy people are getting tax breaks to help the poor, to help other people, that money is not going into anything that we can all vote on. And it's, I'm speaking to Maru's point about NGOs, et cetera. And I think that what we heard from Vijay yesterday about the women's self-help economic groups is a very powerful, not that, you know, those women did not just do regenerative agriculture. That was 20 years into their organizing. And the amounts of cash that those women have is very small, but the organizing that came out of meeting regularly year after year, month after month, week after week, to hear each other's stories while also putting in some amount of whatever income you have into a pool that can help each other is very powerful. It's not going to solve the whole thing, but I think the story of what they have been able to accomplish, there's something for us to learn in there about there's a kind of a commitment when one's own meager resources are part of a pool, and where you are also hearing stories every day, that I think there's something in there to take into this conversation as well. Thank you.
I wanted to say that here in Pennsylvania, welfare benefits for mothers have not been increased since 1990. A mother with 2 children gets $403 a month, and she's forced to do work requirements on top of that. And so this was raised, that there was a coalition, which we're part of, formed to get that money increased. But when in the state budget, they prioritize money for childcare instead of cash assistance. And they also, there was plenty of money, of course, for the child welfare industry. Plus there was a rainy day fund, which has been untouched. And so as a result, we have obviously seen more and more mothers losing their children to the child welfare system. And I wanted to say that that also impacts a big issue here, which is gun violence. Because it turns out a lot of the young people who were involved in gun violence were in foster care, or just struggling with poverty in different ways. And that's something that's a very big issue in this community. In the street where I live, around the corner, there have been numerous shootings. And this is something of a big concern here, and how it's tied to poverty and child welfare is something that I think we're trying to address here, of course. And more of this we can talk about in this discussion tomorrow about the child tax credit and the Worker Relief and Credit Reform Act, for ways of putting money in mothers' hands. But I just wanted to add those things to it. And that also the end of the general assistance here in Pennsylvania has been a very negative impact, because it means that you can't get money to survive on, barely anyway, while you're trying to be found eligible for disability benefits. So now there's nothing there, and a lot more people end up on the streets. And that money was also used to help women leaving domestic violence situations and young people aging out of foster care and things like that. So those are a couple of things that we're working on here.
Okay,
Mike, okay. Nina said some of the things I was going to say from Women Against Rape in the UK. Just to add to what she said about the survivors of child abuse from institutions, about how they've organized, you know, because we're trying to make it practical now. We've worked a bit with the biggest survivors organization of institutional of kids of a children's home, a series of children's homes called the Shirley Oaks Survivors Association, and they were a collection of children's homes across South London. A lot of the kids were children of color, and there was also a whole network of children of color homes, particularly for children of color only. And they have been uncovering a massive network of organized pedophiles who were taking the children regularly, including people who facilitated by the people working there and the police. Hundreds of these survivors have got together and have they have won the biggest compensation payout in British history. I can't tell you how much it is. I'm sorry, I can't keep the figure in my head, but it's hundreds of thousands of pounds. How they did it is they are self-run. They're the biggest self-run, self-organized survivors association that we have ever heard of. And they, despite being absolutely traumatized to the point where people can barely function, they got together as a massive group, and everything they demanded, every time they made demands on the local authority that ran these homes, they went in their hundreds. They had the power of numbers. They were multiracial. They were very determined. They were about half men, half women. And they just went and invaded. Every time the council refused something, they invaded the council chamber. They spoke up. They said what happened. They were absolutely fearless. And they turned their backs on all the big NGOs, all the charities that were supposed to be representing children, and they were not corrupt. And a lot of those survivors got you know, good payouts to help recover and so on. Sorry, NGOs is what you call non-profits, and I'm so pleased as well, you know, about people calling them out. As Maru did, as non-profits who are actually profiteering. And, you know, one of the things that we really have to spread is the fact that social workers are just like the police. They are an arm of the police. The state is committing child abuse. You know, they are strip searching children in Britain. I'm sure they probably do that here as well. They are facilitating child abuse. The mothers and the children are trying to fight for our own safety, but these professionals are making it worse. They're keeping us in abusive situations. They're selling children. They're trafficking children, and they have to be stopped. And another thing that we did, aside from these monthly pickets that Anne spoke about outside the family court, which have been fantastically a breakthrough because the stuff has been so hidden, is that we picketed outside a charity run by men, fathers, abusive fathers, called Families Need Fathers. They are in bed with the family courts. Literally, they are in every area of their work, and every social worker, every institution that the social workers are employed by, and the judges, and we picketed their conference because the president of the family court was an invited speaker, and they are very, very tied up. And that's what needs to be broken, because as people have said, the state is providing abused children taking away children from caring mothers and forcing them to be continually abused, either by abusive fathers or in institutions. And we have to spell it out and say who we need to work with and who we need to work against, and stop the way that the state picks out victims to make one star, because it's corrupting. They corrupt you. They say, oh, this person's so brave and so fantastic. But we only have each other. We only have the strength if we're in numbers and we cross sectors. We're not to be bought off and we're not to be corrupted.
Okay. Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to carry on from that because the Families Need Fathers, this abusive fathers organization, uses parental alienation in court. Parental alienation is the defense of the violent and abusive fathers to try and prevent the fact that they are violent and abusive winning in court. So it's an anti-mother and an anti-child perspective that they use. Parental alienation was invented by a psychiatrist here in the US who clearly hated mothers and children and defended pedophiles. And that's its use in the US, in the UK, particularly, but Brazil, I think particularly, Italy, okay. So parental alienation is this, as I say, junk science, which says that mothers, essentially mothers, are alienating their children from their fathers, ignores the fact that the fathers are abusive and violent. So we say, of course, that families do not need violent fathers. I think we need to at least mention the Picket of Families Need Fathers conference and the fact that the head judge for family court and CAFCAS, which is supposed to be an agency that supports children, are all in bed together with this parental alienation theory. So we, of course, have to challenge that internationally. And I think we should do more work on that. I think, you know, our brothers here in Philly and those in London, we should put our heads together about which organizations, which men's organizations it is that we should target. And we do target them in the sense that we speak about it all the time on the family court picket. We've written about it, but it would be great to do some more work on that and to give them help. Just to say we're doing good in some senses. The UN has now come out against parental alienation. The WHO has come out against parental alienation. So we're on a roll, and we ought to just finish up with the violent men's organizations and call them out every chance we get.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claire from Winvisible, Women with Visible and Invisible Disabilities. One thing we've been doing is highlighting about disabled mothers to the disability movement, which has a tendency to be gender neutral and talk about disabled people as a homogenous group. We're not homogenous. It's majority women, many of us of color, many of us immigrant, lesbian, bi, trans, and so on. And so we're fighting against institutions in general. Tracy mentioned earlier about disabled mothers losing children to forced adoption. One reason is this future harm, that in future your child is going to become your carer and therefore should be saved from this terrible fate. And so obviously if the mothers and the disabled parents get the support services, the home care, the child is not forced to be a carer, or is only a carer to the extent in which it's an enriching and valuable relationship. Because also I always say that the children of disabled mothers are more mature, more skilled, more independent, and good at decision making and so on. And so we're fighting for services, and in general in the disability movement we're fighting against institutions and the scrutiny, we're scrutinized for welfare in terms of the payments that we get, we're scrutinized about our needs, and then with the social workers, we can't say, oh, I need this, I need that. It's all decided by the social worker what you're entitled to, and it's discretionary. And we're fighting, we're putting forward our choice and our independent living to counter the tyranny of the social worker deciding what we can get and cutting budgets when their managers tell them to. We know that there's plenty of money there which is going into the child protection industry, so it's not true that there isn't the funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Hi, I just want to make sure that I know you already know this, but I want to tell you that this panel has been really powerful to me. I've listened to you. It's very relevant to my life, and it's made me remember and really be grateful for all the work I've gotten a chance to do on myself while growing up as a child of a formerly incarcerated mom. Like I think it was Andrea James said, when you incarcerate a mom, it has devastating effects on the ability for the family to move forward, to grow the economy. It also has devastating effects to the whole community that the mom lives in, because my mother was an extremely generous person in the building that she lived in, the community that we lived in. When she went to jail for the first time, it devastated the community. She was someone that people could go to get food from. She was somebody that people could go to get resources from. When they took her, it hurt our whole community, not just our family. That's one. As an incarcerated, my mother was someone who believed very deeply in education. This is the result. My mother was someone who believed deeply in her neighborhood, her community, and you being involved in that community, which I have been. I just turned 60 on Wednesday. I've been doing that work since I was 19 because of her. My mother passed away on Mother's Day in 2015. And she left a lasting legacy. And there were challenges, you know, when you grow up with an incarcerated mom, sometimes you don't, and this was short periods, but a lot of them, you don't get a chance to bond the way you need to. So we had a challenging relationship all of her life, but we figured it out. And luckily we had our neighbors to help us do it. So I just want to remind people that we are not throwaway people.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Burnett. I think it's really a timely reminder, you know, that there should not be mothers in prison, end of, and that there should be no borders between children and their mothers. And these are the things that we're clearly getting down to being able to do together. And yeah, mothers, pregnant mothers, no births in prison. Yeah, so that we have a lot of organizations, grassroots organizations, not the non-governmental organizations that we've been cussing out here, rightly so. Our very last speaker that we have on the list, and I think we probably do want a break after that, is Shao wanted to make another contribution. So.
I am just going to pick up on two things quickly. The abuse in the care and the children's homes in Scotland right now, there's mega cases going on. Paedophile rings galore. One of the cases, I was in that specific unit, which I was speaking to earlier this morning, was a kind of children's remand unit. And the thing I did wrong, run away to London at 15, ruined my life. Was put in a children's home in London and then taken back to Glasgow and then put away in a unit where I turned into an angry young girl, a young woman, whatever, and ended up on the streets of London. But going on that, in Scotland now, they have a redress system where you get £10,000, go away and shut your mouth. You're not allowed to speak about it again. You're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to, you take the £10,000, you go away. And £10,000 to go over the trauma of years and years and years of abuse in a system that put you there. That's what they're doing, right? That's the redress system in Scotland. The other thing is about NGOs, and I'm so proud of my organisation, the Alliance, our organisation, we gave them their money back. £10,000 we handed them straight back and said, ram it. We can't be bought and we can't be fucking taught, right? Keep your money. So Scottish Government got their £10,000 back. We NGOs love kinship now. Nobody wanted to know about kinship care. Nobody wanted to know. Now it's a big fat cash cow. And they're all in at it. And they're in about it and they're on it. And you know, we all know the thing every mother fears, every grandmother, is adoption, fostering, and any sort of part of the system. They gave them our service, our kinship service, they handed to foster and adoption. £270,000 a year. Yeah. They gave us that. I done the petition. I told them, goddamn straight, where were they when we needed the help? No, but they said, we're nothing to do with you and neither the twain shall meet. But when big fat money was involved, oh, we're changing my name to adoption, fostering, and kinship. They got handed £270,000. We, the grassroots organisation, who's out there 24/7, get handed 10, but we handed it back. We survived for 3 years on £54. And we're still fucking sitting here, we're still busting them, and we are still causing a riot. And we will remain to do so. But what I'm saying is this, we are now the big shiny diamond in Scotland. Oh, say you're giving it to the kinship carers. You'll get it, because now there's more of us than there is of them. But remember what your boss said, the strength is in our numbers. And we've got the numbers.
Hello, I just wanted to, I was really influenced by what Tracy, I was influenced by what Tracy said. And I'm thinking about one of the methods that we have found to help get your point across. Oh, okay. And that is taking video of your relationship with your child. And remember, Tracy said her son was one way when he left and another way when he came back. I hear that when parents visit their children, they're different. They look different. They behave differently. But if you have been recording and not just keeping it, because if you have it at home or you have it on your phone, it might be taken. But if you've been sharing it with friends and family, then other people also have this evidence that you can use to show that your children were happy, that they were healthy, and that you had a good relationship. And it's harder for people to take that information if it's spread around. So just keep that in mind. It's not just photographs, which, you know, are traditional, but also share your videos because you may need it one day.
Could you say your name again and what organization you're working with?
Margaret Robertson, and I work with a participatory defense organization here in Germantown called Germantown Hub for Justice. It's a national organization. We usually represent people who have criminal cases, but we're starting, at least some hubs are starting to move into dependency cases also.
Thank you. One more sentence I should have said, which is that while these social workers and police are busy taking our kids away, they're also not responding to our calls for help. When we
need, you know, them to be protected from violence. So they're just letting it happen. They're just letting the violence happen and instead taking the children away from the mothers. Sometimes they're committing the violence themselves, but also they are responsible for a lot of child murders as well as sexual abuse of children.
I just want to pass around these 3 examples, this other side, turn the other side to see the protests, to see the kinds of protests we do. We mainly insult the professionals like the lawyers and the judges, and Children's Hospital has reduced how long they keep the children and how much they treat the children because they have businesses. As long as you embarrass people with businesses, they're worried about it. And all the other agencies don't have businesses other than the adoption businesses. And so we also make a lot of songs and sing a lot of songs to these people with mean words like, you better watch out, you better not cry. Anyhow, so we have songs, we have a community destruction award. I want you to read that. We tell everything they're doing in the community. We make it an award. We give it to them. We send it to them. And someone here just suggested we should be posting it on the billboards too, which we should do and we will start doing now, because we just make everyone know this is really happening. We need to abolish the family police, which is Child Protective Services. We need to abolish it. It really is absolutely not functioning for anything except family police, and it's extremely racist. It's extremely anti-poor, extremely anti-poor. So I just want you to take a look at, and you know, we have fun doing this stuff. It's fun giving community destruction awards. We go to the head lawyer and we insist she come down and listen to what she's doing wrong. And you know, and the same kind of thing with Children's Hospital. We go to the head when she's performing at an event like this, and we'll go to her and talk to her and tell her and give her an award. And then sometimes they let us sing all the songs in the award because they think it's a real award. It was all pretty because we were giving her an award. She had to make herself pretty. And only after we got to like the second, they take them when they're sleeping. They take them from their beds. They don't care if you're bad or good, so get that through your head. Start hearing what we're singing, their attitude changes.
Well, just to say that in the film Mrs. Chatterjee v. Norway, the way that the mum got her case brought to very high public attention was she went to, oh, is it a spoiler alert? Okay, spoiler alert. She went to a high-powered meeting where an Indian member of parliament had come, you know, schmoozing with the Norwegian government to have a trade deal or something, and stood up and raised her case right in the middle of this big event. And it was that really triggered her to be able to eventually get her kids back.
In terms of the self-help that we do in London, you know, we have mothers meetings once a month where mothers come with their cases, and some of it is in person and some of it is online. So we have the court picket one week, and then we have the mothers meetings the following week. And I think one thing that's important is that on the one hand, we use whatever tactics we can. Like, for example, often you don't take on the social workers directly. You try to question what they're doing, like asking questions as opposed to telling them to fuck off because they're going to use it against you, etc. On the other hand, as in the film Mrs. Chatterjee, there are mothers who have gone absolutely public. Some have gone to jail as a result of it for contempt of court, and nevertheless have won their children afterwards. So I think it's really important when we discuss, you know, what strategies to follow, that every option is considered and that we back people in the way they want to go. Because, you know, for some mothers, you know, sometimes it's a bit like when you're in prison and you're innocent, and in order to get parole, they want you to confess to something you haven't done. There are people who are able to do that in order to get out, and there are people who will never. Because your whole life, you know, to admit to something you haven't done is just unbearable, and it's going to mess up everything you stand for and your relationship with your child. And there are mothers who just will never, beg to the social workers in order to be able to get the visitation and the this and the that. So I think it's really important not to get stuck in whatever seems to work, and therefore you tell people you've got to do this. But we just back every way that mothers want to go and that children want to go to be together, and that's what needs to be done.
Yeah, I just wanted, I kind of have a foot on both sides of the Atlantic, so I wanted to make a comment on each of them in one way. The whole question of women going to prison and mothers particularly going to prison in the UK has been exacerbated by the fact that overwhelmingly women going to prison in the UK, and they don't make a distinction in the UK between jail and prison. You go to prison, period. There is no jail, right? So even when they do send you on remand, which is before you've been sentenced or convicted or anything, right? 50% of the women who are going into prison in the UK, mothers mainly, are going on remand. They're going where they have not even been convicted yet. That's what's happening in the UK. And I think something similar is happening here, apart from anything else, because of the bail requirements in this country, right? Which means that people can't pay the bail, poor people can't pay the bail. And of course, the majority of, on both sides of the Atlantic, the majority is, on both sides of the Atlantic, are poor people and people of color. I mean, that's what's happening. And in fact, we recently found out that there are more people proportionately in the UK, people of color, going to prison than in the United States, which is really unbelievable, right? And really shocking, as somebody said. The other comment I wanted to make was in relation to, again, the question of kids in the US, because one of the most scary things I've seen recently is that 14 states have now passed laws weakening child labor laws in the United States. And that, frankly, is another way of taking away the kids, because they don't go to school. The parents are clearly so poor that they're having to allow their kids to do this, right? And it really is going back not to the 20th century, but to the 19th century. I thought we had fought for hundreds of years to get rid of child labor. Now they're putting 10-year-olds in meat factories where kids are losing their fingers. And so that's another way in which they are separating kids from their parents and putting everybody at odds with each other. And I just thought we needed to add that into the mix. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, we're gonna, Margaret is gonna be our last speaker now, because after that, we're going to finish up, have lunch, and come back here for 1:30.
Yes, Mildred Aristide is prepared to speak at 1:30. So whatever is happening at about 1:20, your food or whatever, just bring it back here because she's on a schedule. But thank you, Sam, for what you just raised. One of the things I wanted to mention is that there's practically nothing in the United States that isn't seen from the lens of race. And I really want to emphasize that although impoverished children are being impacted across the board, the percentage of Black children that are being taken is phenomenal in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, and across this nation. And for those of us who've been to Children's Court and seen the ads that they put in the newspaper, because they, like, for example, in Los Angeles, they need to put a little ad in a paper before they basically auction off a child. And they put it in the downtown business newspaper, so people in the community won't see it. But if you go there, it's like the new slave auction block. child after child of Black children, Indigenous children are also being taken at a high rate. You heard the figures earlier. And a lot of those children, as Nina mentioned, are being sexually abused. But in the United States, they're sending a lot of them to these right-wing fundamentalist families where the children are entirely cut off from their communities, from their culture, or any such thing. And they're being raised or homeschooled in this very rigid, conservative way of thinking. One result of that is one of the leaders who organized the January 6th attack, insurrection in Washington, D.C., was a mixed race Black kid who had been adopted with a very, very right-wing, ultra right-wing family in Utah somewhere. So I just wanted to, underscore that as something that's going on. And what Sam said is the very reason that we are here and we're coming together, and the reason that on Monday, a number of us are going to be outside family court here in Philadelphia. Some information will be given on that. So everybody who's able to join us, please do. One last thing too I wanted to say about prisons. Women are the fastest growing population of people going to prison in the United States. And 80% of them in prison are mothers, specifically single mothers. And a lot of that clearly has to do with poverty, has to do with lack of resources, and it also has to do with the crack epidemic that the CIA was involved in, bringing crack into communities like South LA. And when the opioid epidemic happened, now there's treatment and all of that kind of stuff. But when crack was down in Black communities, you were just being criminalized. You weren't saying there's something wrong. Here's this shot you could take so you don't OD, or where you could go get treatment. So all of that is all part and parcel of what mothers in prison are facing. And one quick thing too, the other thing that Clinton did, Pat mentioned the Clinton administration, Pat Gowans, is this fast track adoption business. So that when a child is born, within 6 months, that child is put on a clock to go, a child that's taken for fast track adoption. And God forbid they should go in a hospital and a mother, they find a little trace of marijuana or whatever, maybe you was sitting next to somebody who was smoking some weed, whatever. They will call social services and they will take that child from a mother who has just given birth in hospital. And the majority of them are Black and brown children. So all of this is interconnected with all our demand about cash for mothers and resources for mothers and grandmothers like Sabrine, so none of this crap is happening, but also to be working with our sisters who are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, who have given a lot of leadership on this issue. Sydney mentioned it, but that Kamliger bill that established a precedent in the United States, that was put forward by formerly incarcerated women. It was a new way of life that shepherded that bill through. And it's not the first time we've gotten some leadership from incarcerated people, because the prisoner hunger strike that happened in California, the largest work stoppage in the history of the United States, that was by men and some women who were behind prison, including some of them who were in solitary confinement. So if they can do it, what about the rest of us? And I think that's something that we're working out and considering in our way forward today. Thanks.